This video was made using a free early access key provided by Paradox Interactive. Hi, my name is WinSlaya and welcome to my 10 tops tips for playing with the new content that comes with the Butler free update and the Necroids Species Pack for Stellaris, both of which release on October 29th. I did want to say before we get into my tips that I've only played through one game of this. I only did one empire, and I haven't got enough experience with it to form any really strong opinions. A lot of these are just kind of like things I noticed and things I feel like newer players and maybe people who haven't been following the dev diaries would really appreciate having touched upon. One or two of the things I'm going to mention later were things that I saw in the feature stream by DJ on I think it was the 21st. Yeah, so if you've seen that, maybe there's some things that you missed from the stream that he just said very quickly that I highlighted in my description below. You can jump between the different points using my description if that sounds good to you. So yeah, without further ado, let's jump into tip number 1. So my first tip is to create 4, 5, or 6 new empires using the new traits or the new origin to give yourself some new things to interact with on the map. If you've played a lot of Stellaris, you've interacted with pretty much every variation of every empire, and having a couple that play a little bit differently, especially the Necrophage, will really shake things up in your galaxy. One of the things I actually forgot to do when I created all of these is I forgot to go in and change the ship type. I actually left them all, I think, on their default ship type. You should be using the Necroids if you're going to be using anything kind of like undead or potentially evil. I guess it looks a bit like a Cylon ship, so you could maybe play a mechanical race using that ship type. That's one of the great things about the ship types and the system in general. This one may not be the best option for it because they're Memorialist. Memorialist is pretty cool. You can put on Hiveminds, you can put them on robots, and you can put them on the regular empires. Very, very universal, which we'll get to more later. My next tip is to try and play as the new pre-scripted race as soon as possible. The Pasharti absorbers, I think that's how you say that. They've got the Jeffersonian or Jefferians in their nation, and I think some unique options available to them. If I had to guess, I feel like maybe the Jeffarians can get back in control over their necrophage overlords, but I don't know. If you don't want to see any spoilers, I'd recommend you try this as soon as possible because there's probably going to be a lot of spoilers all over the internet. The devs have made a pretty big deal out of Jeff and on Twitter, and I guess pretty much everywhere. They seem to be pretty big fans of this new appearance that you have available to you. This guy right here, Jeffersonians. No, not Jeffersonians, Jefferians. They're different. Jeffersonians were, I think, early American history. My next tip is to give Hivemind and Spiritualist empires another try. I know a lot of people do like to play as Hivemind empires. That one is one that can be a little bit competitive with robotic empires. But only really in the early game. They've got really good growth in the early game, but they tend to fall behind the others with the amount of technology that robot empires typically can get. They eventually do pull ahead. I think there has been a bit of an effort to try and make Spiritualists and Hiveminds a little bit more valid. There seems to be a couple new traits in the dev diary. They said that there was some more stuff that the Hiveminds can get, which brings that aspect of their empire more in line with the regular empires. And I think there is some other things in the dev diary and the patch notes that say a little bit more about why they come become a little bit more valid. I have noticed that a lot of the newer buildings, the things that the not necrophages, the things that the like the death cults and the memorialists, they can generate a lot of unity, which is what spiritualist empires are all about. In case you've forgotten, spiritualists are capable of getting a boost to their unity gain. So you can really power through your unity tree, and then maybe even consider shifting out of like full-blown spiritualist, or maybe even out of spiritualist into materialist to get yourself some research. Personally, I prefer role playing, but you know, it seems like a decent option for multiplayer if you want to try out spiritualist again. I think it could be kind of fun, and you know, beating a bunch of robots with a psychic empire is honestly some of the most fun I've ever had in multiplayer. Me and DJ, you may know him as the community ambassador, I think that's his title. We did a MP last year in December where me, him, and another creator took spiritualist, and we decided to pretend to be everybody else's allies. We decided to pretend to get along with the machines, and then the contingency struck. So we were like, this is your fault, you're ruining Christmas, and we had to come save Christmas as the spiritualist. So yeah, I mean, that's just personally how I like to play, and it kind of leads me to my next tip, which is try and roleplay with these new civics. I think if you do that, you're going to have a little bit more fun. There was something in here about something in the dev diary from a while back, 183, about memorialists and Jesselt consciousness getting some special, I think, events just to make it a little bit more fun. Let's see if I read this here. I also find that they occasionally have, the memorialist Jesselts occasionally have more solemn responses, things that are usually restricted to spiritualists. And if you want to be like a more friendly, gentler Hivemind, you can be a empath with memorialist. I chose one mind because I think, you know, rushing unity with memorialist is a pretty awesome, fun way to play. But you could go in here and where is it? That, yeah, you can get rid of one mind and take empath. We're a nice guy. We want to be everyone's friends. Seems like a fun way to try and change the way you typically approach the game. I mean, if you're a warmonger, maybe try this out, see if you like it. But yeah, you should always roleplay a little bit with your guys. If your people like death cults, maybe you're a little bit more reckless and willing to do something silly. If you're reanimated armies, you're probably going to want to go out into warfare and fight people, so you can reanimate more people, get the most out of your reanimated armies. I know you could be like, well, maybe we're just raising the dead to protect our own, and we're good evil dudes. Like, what is good? What is evil? Sometimes the evilest things are done by people who think they're good. So yeah, next tip. My next tip is to try mixing the Ascension traits, which to look at a little bit of, we're going to need to actually load up the game. I'll load up this later one here. Won't take more than a minute. But yeah, there was a post in the patch notes about how if you can create a species that is both cybernetic or psionic, I think it's both psionic or cybernetic and erudite, the resulting leaders can now get both the cybernetic, psionic, and the erudite traits. So there was someone else that followed up with that, some embedded QA person, I think their name is Alfred Strike, and they said that some of the other devs didn't like him playing as a lithoid, necrophage, psychic, cyborg, erudite. That seems like a lot of like incredibly powerful traits. But yeah, if you aren't familiar, I've got a cyborg here, cybernetics, because this race actually went with materialist, and it was in the end we shifted into full-blown materialist, and that combined with necrophage alone is really nice because you get a crazy amount of leader lifespan. They really do become pretty much immortal if you combine all of that stuff together. But imagine having the happiness and the extra research from Psychic plus the extra research from Erudite on top of all of this. I forget what Lithoid does, but I may have some Lithoid cybernetics. I didn't mix all this stuff. Yeah, this guy's a Lithoid, so silver pop growth, that doesn't matter because your necrophages typically convert other people into them. They aren't really the ones that get chosen to grow at all. Like, they are just, their rate is so low that's it's less likely to get chosen. So yeah, try that out. You may like it. So this next tip is less of a tip and more of just a, hey, look, that this change, it's going to really change how you interact with precursors and other locations that spawn in partway through the game, the ones that aren't there at the beginning of the game. Because now when they do spawn in, they have 2 jumps. I think with this one I spawned in this using a console command, and I spawned in this system right here using a console command. And in this situation over here, this nation is very happy with this situation. They've got access to it. No one else does it. They want to close borders. They are going to be the only ones that can get to that easily and get that resource. Over here means that if this nation, say, spawned in the location, they're going to have to try and rush in here before the other ones take that, and then make all the time that this nation spent researching the precursors worthless to them and useful to this guy. And that means, you know, I think as somebody who plays multiplayer, I may be even less inclined to go for precursors, because you can spend a bunch of time on a precursor that somebody else has already gotten, and that means that you're wasting your time, and this can make that a little bit trickier. But I also really like it because it means that we're less likely to have like your system spawn on the opposite side of some cluster. It thinks that, you know, you're close here, so it can put it here, and then it connects over here for whatever reason. I've definitely had that happen to me in 1 or 2 games, so I don't really know exactly how to feel about this change yet. I think it is a good change, because it is kind of weird how they can get put over here and it's all isolated. And, you know, by doing things like this, it can open up new routes in between clusters too. So it seems like a pretty exciting change. So we have gone back to the Empire creation page so that I can look a little bit more at the description of Necrophage, so that we can look at it a little bit together. These guys are all about snowballing population in the early game. You start next to some primitive civilizations. Your guaranteed habitable planets are going to have some pops on them, and I believe they started with 12 pops. We'll load up a save at the beginning of the game to show off what I ran across, and what you're likely to see if you have guaranteed habitable planets turned on. Of course, you can turn off all guaranteed habitable planets, and I think some people in multiplayer will do that so that necrophages don't have such a massive boost to population growth. But they kind of need it. I mean, their own primary people don't grow their pops very quickly, and your pre-patent species that you start with, sure, they can grow things, but because of the way they like do their jobs, I think you'll fall behind pretty quickly without those primitive civilizations to give you that boost. I don't know. I haven't played in a multiplayer with this stuff, so it's hard to really say at this point. The necrophage pops may be leaders or take ruler jobs. I think they can work specialist jobs and worker jobs, whereas the pre-patent species, and I think anybody who's not a necrophage, will be restricted to worker jobs or the necrophyte specialist jobs, which turns them into necrophages. It's this bullet point right here. So let's go back, load up. I think like year 6 or something was when I got my first primitive, and I unfortunately didn't explore very well and find the second set of primitives that quickly. I think if I had invaded them both really early in the game, then I would have had some pretty big issues, because these guys are going to require consumer goods. There's population here that has needs. They consume half a point of consumer goods, and they take a food. They produce one food, amenities, and a little bit of extra stuff. It's not a great exchange at the beginning, but it does pay off later. It's different, which is something I really like about them. I noticed that you can't actually build the thing that converts them in the Chamber of Elevation while a species, or rather while a planet is still experiencing stellar culture shock. But if you go over to another empire, invade them, I believe you can build this right away and start converting people. It'll take 10 years for your guys to start popping up on that planet, and that is a long time. But there's some other really fun things that happen along with that process. Something that I haven't seen highlighted anywhere else is, if you look here in the Harmony tree, Necrophaging pops provides unity. I was getting, I think, about 34 unity per pop in the late game. It is something that I adopted in the late game. I didn't see it until I'd been playing for quite a while, so I don't really know what the base unity you get per pop is, but it seems like a nice little extra thing to make the whole converting process more efficient in the late game. What else was there? I feel like there was something else about culture shock. Right, you can't resettle species with culture shock. I feel like that used to be a thing at one point, but if they have this, I can't take them and move them over here and start getting them elevated on my capital. I can send my guys over here to work like the leader jobs, which is something I probably will do. But yeah, this civilization, I think I was focusing more on expanding on the map than actually getting my population going, and if I really wanted my population going, I would have explored this stuff. I think the second primitive civilization was right here, and I was like, I don't need that. That's in between two necks that I need to go through. But yeah, keep that in mind. If you're Necrophage, you may want to rush for the primitives. You may not be able to because of the upkeep and other issues that you run into. I did notice that the Chamber of Elevation boosts your stability. That's awesome. And so does the Sanctuary of Repose. They are able to take up your early game income quite a bit. It's less good in the late game because you use other ways to get stability, like happiness. Once you get to like 100% habitability, you can't go over that. So yeah, if you want, you can put a lot of primitives in this galaxy, and Necrophages will have a really fun time doing that. I think multiplayer where everybody does Necrophages and there's a bunch of primitives would be an interesting setting to play in. And if that sounds like something you'd like to do with me, let me know in the comments down below. I'd be up for trying to set up a game like that. But yeah, next tip. Oh, I did forget to mention that the Necrophages have a pretty nice option here, adaptability. It replaces diplomacy. You can still actually form federations, but it gives you this option to get an extra free building slot, which means if you want to go for robots, you could get some pretty crazy population growth on your colonies using robots and the necrophaging mechanic. The next thing we're going to talk about is the Memorialist Civic. We've already talked a little bit about it, so I don't think this will take very long. It combines really well with the Necrophage build because, both are boosting stability, but unlike this one, unlike that one, I think the Sanctuary of Repose doesn't do quite as well in the late game. I don't think it extends as well into the late game because its Death Chroniclers give you unity and research, and the amount of unity, sure, it looks like a lot, but I think in the late game with the way unity scales, it becomes much less useful. This is really cool because of the converting population thing and giving you the nice necrophage pops, which have all those nice bonuses associated with them. They got extra ruler output, extra specialist output, less food upkeep, less mineral upkeep. So I think that extends better into the late game, and this is more better in the early game. If you're at 100% stab, like I said in the last tip, it's not going to make you any benefit if you upgrade this. So yeah, you probably want to spend your exotic gases on something else other than upgrading stuff like this, unless maybe you're on a tomb world or a relic world. If I go to here, I'll say you get extra governing ethics attraction on tomb worlds and relic worlds if you're a regular thing, and I think if you're a Hivemind, it reduces deviancy, and there may be another one out there that I'm forgetting. But to show off how much it does, I need to just go here and load up year 130. I think I had a tomb world on the southern edge of my empire, and I can show off exactly how much it is. These buildings replace temples, which are your primary way of getting unity as a spiritualist. I think there's another building that the regular empires get other than temples. So, you won't be able to get unity out of the temples if you're going for this. This one is the easiest to shift into, I noticed. It has the least requirements. If you're like trying to reform your government, it just says you don't have to be fanatic purifier, so probably don't want to do that in the late game, because as I said, this one doesn't do you as much good in the late game. But it is worth considering if you need unity for whatever reason. This is my tomb world, right? Yeah, tomb world. If I go in here and I try to create Sanctuary of Repose, we'll see that it's plus 20% governing ethics attraction for this building. I'm sure if you upgrade it to the next level, it's another 20%. That would be what makes the most sense to me. Oh, of course, it is worth mentioning that Memorialists can't go with corporate, so I guess that's for balancing reasons. They may get way too much stability and allow their smaller empires to perform really, really well, especially in the early game. So maybe it was taken out for that reason, or it just doesn't make sense in their mind. Corporations being all like obsessed with memorials. I could see it in my mind. All right. The next thing we're talking about is the Death Cult Civic. It is really, really good for people who want to play tall, because, sacrificing some of your population means you have less population to contribute to your sprawl. And if you are a corporation, you may need to use that sprawl for corporate offices. So I really like the idea of combining corporations with death cults. It makes a lot of sense in my head. And one of the really cool things that I heard in the stream on the 21st was that if you combine Gospel of the Masses with corporate death cult, then you get like a lot of unity from your spiritualists. You're kind of like really investing in that spiritualist kind of gameplay. And I think kind of being an evil death cult that's proselytizing to the rest of the universe, come join us, like it just seems really silly and fun for roleplay purposes and for multiplayer. If you want to go around being like, this is the way, we can make you all better by showing you how to sacrifice your own people willingly. But yeah, I like that the corporate death cults are slightly different than the regular death cults. If I tag into him, and I should have actually looked up what the tag is, we can see what the cost is for oh nice, it's the first one. We can see what the cost is for the sacrifice mechanic and the edicts, I believe. Yeah, there we go. We got sacrifice bounty, sacrifice harmony, sacrifice togetherness. Bounty is more expensive than togetherness and harmony for death cults, and I believe for regular death cults, the non-corporate ones, they're the same price across the board. I don't know exactly what they're going to be, but I'm going to assume that they are like in between these numbers, that they boosted this one up a little bit and took these ones down a little bit. Togetherness will give you some unity, some pop growth speed, which I guess could get you more pops than you sacrifice in the long run. I haven't done the math on this, so I don't really know. Seems kind of weird and risky. This one will increase happiness and pop growth. So I guess maybe if you combine those two, you can get some pretty high population growth. It says it can go up to plus 50%. I don't know. It seems silly. This will boost your income. So yeah, maybe in the late game, once you got like some unemployed pops, you just like off one of them and you're getting some more mineral income and some energy income. That seems like something that you probably want to do at one point in a game, because you know at a certain point you're just like, I've got all these pops I don't know what to do with. And yeah, just resettling them to the planets where you built the buildings that you sacrifice the people on. It sounds like it would work pretty well. I haven't tried this out myself yet, so I don't know. What else is there? Yeah, you have to be spiritualist to use this civic. You know, I actually hadn't noticed what this building does, and I see why it would feed well into the gospel of the masses. It has the ability to give you more spiritualist ethics attraction, which means you'll have more people to generate the unity. I think every pop that is spiritualist and gospel of the masses generates more unity, so that makes sense. But it also gives you two types of jobs, not just the mortal initiates, which are the people you sacrifice. You get the death priest job, which I think gives a similar amount of unity research, and then something extra to the option that that we were just looking at over on my other empire. Death cults have death priests, whereas I think Memorials have death chroniclers. It's a similar name. At first I was like, that's the same thing. I mean, they both produce research and unity, but the other one produces, I think, amenity for a little bit less of the other things. It's a similar job. The last thing we're looking at today is the Reanimated Armies Civic. If I click up here, we can see what it says. It says right here that you're able to build dread encampments instead of the military academy, and that allows you to recruit undead armies. Basically, these armies don't have morale, and you know, that sounds pretty cool, but I think the job that it provides is honestly more interesting than having armies that can run around without morale, because it's like, this is a space game. Land armies don't make that big of a difference, but the jobs that go with them, I think they're really, really interesting. This one right here, the Necromancer job, will provide 4 base physics, 4 base society research, and no engineering research. And instead of that, you get some, I think, defensive armies. I think that little bullet sign with a plus means you get 4 more armies. The stronghold would be, I think, +3. So it's much better than a soldier job. It's like this, but you get a lot more out of it. And I would say it's pretty comparable to a researcher job, because each researcher, I think, is about 4-8 research, right? But you get extra things along with them. Job-based production, maybe I'm wrong. I thought it was 4, but even if it is half of that, the naval camp addition I think is a pretty big deal. Being able to throw down the encampments on all of your planets to just boost your naval capacity could really help out in the mid to late game, because there usually is a point where you've filled up all of your star-based capacity and you don't want to build any more anchorage points, but you need more ships. Being able to get more naval capacity on your ground can be quite valuable. But there's no argument that between what is better, this Necromancer job or a soldier job. In my mind, it's just like, well, yeah, the Necromancer, it's got the same upkeep and it gives you the same results. I'm not sure if this is being increased by some of my doctrines or something like that. I may just load up a earlier version of the game to see what it says at the beginning. Won't take but a second, because there's like nothing that's been developed on this map. Okay, so if we look here and we go to a researcher, their production is, it looks like 8 research per job. If I go here and click on him, yeah, researchers, oh, you're actually not producing 8 for whatever reason. Producing closer to the number I was expecting. Okay, so maybe they are comparable. I'm not terribly sure, because it looks like 2 researchers are producing about what this is showing right here. So yeah, they are comparable in terms of research. That's what I thought. That's what I wrote down in my notes, but then I started doubting myself when I was looking at those numbers. I'm glad I proved it on camera here. What else is there to say about this? yeah, I don't see it being very useful in the early game. If you want to try out Stefan Anon's no fleet challenge and just have armies all across your nation, and you're just like spamming armies when you go to war, you can, I think, avoid getting them to land armies that way. I personally haven't tried that strategy. I don't know how valid it is in multiplayer. I do know spamming armies is a thing in multiplayer, so maybe this is actually a pretty decent option. But I would say not to start off with. I think it'd be a good option to shift into once you can pick a third Civic. Once you have 3 Civic slots, then I would probably think more about picking this up. I started with it in this game because I wanted to play around with it. I wanted to see if it was any good in the early game. I don't feel like it is after my very limited amount of time with it. But yeah, let's see. Is there anything else here in my notes? It does not continuously spawn in armies. When I first read the description, I thought maybe the Necromancer is going to keep making armies over and over and over again until I have like 100 armies and like a crazy amount of army strength. But no, it's just the what it lists off there is the +4, I think it was in the list. Yeah, it gives you 4 army strength. That's what I was seeing when I checked it earlier. When you have extra experience, you get extra health and morale on your defensive army, so that boosts your defensive capabilities as well. Yeah, it's pretty easy to switch into the Civic, I think. It has very little requirements. You just need to not be a pacifist or have citizen service or Hivemind. So yeah, that's everything I wanted to say on the upcoming new content. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to leave a like or maybe a comment. I will be playing some multiplayer Age of Wonders Planetfall this weekend on Saturday, so if you want to come hang out for that, that'd be awesome. We'll play at 9 a.m. Pacific. I forget what the D in PDT stands for, but not Pacific Standard Time, because I think that's slightly different. We're going to go with PDT. So yeah, see you around. Have a good one.